All right, we are back to our Bible class session this afternoon. Last week we went out into the community to do some street evangelism. I know those who are accustomed to our Bible class online we did put an announcement there that we would be out, and so we're back the first Sabbath here in February, and the sun sets now after about 6:05, 6:03, somewhere there. So days are now getting a little longer, and we are still on Adventist Home. All right, so this aspect of country and city as it relates to the family, we just want to wrap up that section, and then we can move over to our next study. All right, so we are back here at the family and the city, and this is part 3. All right, this is part 3 of the family and the city. So let us get settled as we are still in holy time. We're still on the Lord's Sabbath, though we are nearing the sunset in another hour to close off another Sabbath and another week. I want to thank God for continuing to spare our lives. Time is going quickly. We are now in the shortest month of the year, 28 days, but this is a leap year, and so it will be 29 days. All right, join me in prayer before we begin. Loving Lord, eternal Father, thank you for your grace and for your mercy and for your compassion, for all that you have done, are doing, and will do. As your church continues to march forward, ask, O Lord, that you may continue the work that you begun in us. Our objective and aim is to please you and to be saved in your eternal kingdom. As we study your word and your guide, may we be obedient as we learn in Jesus' name. Amen. All right, let us begin. I want to start at Romans chapter 1. Romans, the chapter is chapter 1. And I want to establish a principle today. All right, so we're going to start at verses 18 there, Romans chapter 1. And we start at verse 18. The Bible says, "For the wrath of God is revealed from heaven against all ungodliness and unrighteousness of men who hold the truth in what? Unrighteousness." Verse 19 says, "Because that which may be known of God is manifest in them, for God hath shewed it unto them." Verse 20, "For the invisible things," watch this now, church, "of him from the creation of the world are clearly seen, being understood by the things that are made, even his eternal power and Godhead, so that they are without excuse." So we understand here in Romans chapter 1 that the invisible things that are not seen by the human eye, are made manifest, made known by the things that he has made, or I can say it this way, by the visible things. So the invisible things are made known and understood by the observation of the visible things. Are we clear? All right, church? So I want to say that the very things around us, can you agree that nature, this world, the trees, the birds, are these things visible? Do they speak to the mind of the invisible? For example, God. As it says there, see what it says in verse 20? Even his eternal power and what? Godhead. So that they are without excuse. I'm going to make a bold statement. The statement I'm going to make is this, that country living actually affords a greater opportunity for man to connect with God than the city. And for the very reason of nature, the very reason of the trees and the birds, which are the visible, or what he hath made. There it is. So it says, verse 18, because that which may be known of God is manifest in them, for God hath showed it unto them. Okay? And it says the red words in verse 20, being understood by the things that are made. And so the things that are made are the visible. Okay? And in verse 18, if you go to the verses before that, it's speaking about the reprobate mind. It's speaking about the ungodly people and the ungodly practice. And that's why it says, for the wrath of God is revealed from heaven against all ungodliness and unrighteousness of man who hold the truth in unrighteousness. And they have no excuse. And the reason they have no excuse is that they understand and can know the invisible, such as God, by the very things that they see, which are the visible. And remember, when Paul wrote this, was the world as developed as it is today? Was the world as developed as it is today? No. So let me ask a question. Were there more natural scenes, just generally, than there are today? Yes. Back then, you never had to make so much a special effort to be in contact with just nature. I use the word nature to mean natural things. Trees, birds, rivers, seas, the plain, the grass. You never had to make so much a special effort as you have to make today because the world is developed. Generally, you're seeing a lot of false things. False things are your cars, your AI, your robots, your computer, your gadgets, your tablets. All of these things are more false things, are artificial things. These things don't tend to pull you towards God, but they tend to lead you opposite. All right? And we can see that by the generation that we're living in. By the generation that we are living in. Let's go forward. All right. Here is another text. It says John 1, and this is verse 3. What it says here, all things were made by him. Who is him? God. And without him was not anything made that was made. So, when you see the works of creation, does it speak to your mind of the God of creation? It's like a question was asked to an atheist. So, do you believe that there's a God? No. I'm an atheist. The person says, okay. The belief that you have it's not congruent with reality. As a matter of fact, it cannot be supported by anything. The man said, okay, if you see a painting, must there be an artist? Could it paint itself? If you see the radio, there must have been the radio creator or the one who makes it, because it could not make itself. And he went on with several things. Now, do you see creation? I mean, can any man claim to make the tree? That tree out there that just grew and flourishes. The animals, who made the very first one? Where did the first one come from? Reproduction. All of these things speaks to the fact that there has to be a creator. Can we agree? And the atheist just stood there with nothing to say, because the atheist idea does not make sense. That out of nowhere came something. No. That nowhere is really God, who is and was and will be and ever was the self-existing one. All right, so all things were made by him, and without him was not anything made that was made. Look at Job. Look at Job. Let's look at this text. Job chapter 12, and we're starting at verse 7. I like this. This is powerful. But ask now the beasts, and they shall teach thee, and the fowls of the air, and they shall tell thee, or speak to the earth, and it shall teach thee, and the fishes of the sea shall declare unto thee. Verse 9, who knoweth not in all these that the hand of the Lord hath wrought this. Verse 10, in whose hand is the soul of every living thing and the breath of all mankind. Powerful conversation here in Job chapter 12. And of course you understand the language that is being used, that it doesn't mean to literally ask the beasts. You can't talk to animals that walk on the earth. We don't communicate like that. What does the text mean when it says, ask the beasts, they shall teach thee? When you observe animals, when you observe the ants, how they work, the birds, they testify to the fact of a creator. The fowls of the air, how they fly, how they migrate in the cold, come back when it's warm, how they, just different things, how the ants work to carry the load together, how when the water goes down, are you there with me? How it is that the fish will burrow in the ground to stay alive, how the top of the surface freezes in winter and the fish are still there alive. They teach thee these things, they tell thee of a creator. Speak to the earth, you plant the seed and leave it there, and the rain falls and the earth receives the water, and the seed begins to grow, and the earth nourishes that root, and it grows, and you come back a week after and it gets bigger, and the leaves are beautiful until it begins to bud, and then it bears the food. Ask the earth, and it shall teach thee, okay? And the fishes of the sea, who know it not in all these, that the hand of the Lord hath wrought this, in whose hand is the soul of every living thing and the breath of all mankind. And today you can actually, so there's a hand, and today you can actually go on YouTube and type in to see the video of the growth of a baby in the uterus. They'll show you from the sperm reach the egg till it goes and it lodges in the lining of the uterus, implantation, and it implants there, and it begins to divide into a morella from 4 to 8 to 16 to 32 cells to 64 cells, and it continues, and then it begins to form a bud, and inside that bud it pushes out first, the heart starts to form, and then the little buds, the hand and the feet, and then it's an ugly thing like an alien, then it begins to form, and then the eyes, and then it begins, and every week by every month. It's amazing if you sit down and watch that, and you do nothing. A man and a woman, they're intimate, husband and wife, and the sperm meets, and from there God takes over totally. It is a miracle, life, all right, in the hand of the Creator. Sister Carol?
As you were saying, 80s, two things come to mind. I'm not defer you from the topic. Pharaoh and Nebuchadnezzar. You would say Pharaoh would have been an atheist? At his reaction when he asked, who is God? It was just mind-blowing when he said that, asked that question. He would have been an atheist?
Yeah, so we have to understand from biblical times that all of these kingdoms, you're referring to Babylon, Nebuchadnezzar,
yeah,
and Egypt in the south, which is Pharaoh's. These kingdoms were Gentile kingdoms.
But
the only kingdom that was or should be and represented God on the earth in those ancient world was Israel. Okay? They understood that there is one true God. In those Gentile nations, for example, in Egypt, the pharaohs were considered to be gods.
oh,
And if they are considered to be God, then they would not serve God, because they have themselves as God. And both Egypt and Babylon, they builded a lot of statues, and each of them represent God of this and so. So they were, you know, an atheist believes there's no God. They were idol worshippers. Their idea of God was thwarted. I don't want to know if I would want to say atheists, because they believe there is gods and they were God. Atheists believes totally that there's no such thing as that concept of God. So it was a little different thing, but it was still anti-God in terms of the Creator. For they had themselves as gods. All right? And they builded many gods. Common G-O-D-S.
with Nebuchadnezzar now, did he know God before he went into exile there?
No, Nebuchadnezzar knew not of God. But it was because of the witness of Daniel that he found God and even got converted. And Nebuchadnezzar will be in the kingdom.
So,
God humbled him with the experience 7 years eating grass.
so didn't God use him one time to conquer the Israelites?
Yes, God uses men for his own purpose at his own time. Not because God is using somebody means that they're godly, no. Not because God is using somebody means that they're godly. That's why he's God. He can choose to do whatever he wants. That makes him God. God can use somebody for his purpose, but that does not mean the person themselves is godly.
Oh.
And we have the cases of like Nebuchadnezzar. God was using him to punish the Israelites, but at that time he himself did not know of God.
Oh.
Cyrus, the Medes and Persian. So just remember, not because God uses a human instrumentality means that they are godly or righteous or even know of God. That's why he's God, because he's not limited.
Okay.
All right. All right, let's go forward. Luke 14, verse 28, the Bible says, "For which of you, intending to build a tower, sitteth not down first and counteth the cost, whether he have sufficient to finish it? Lest haply after he hath laid the foundation, and is not able to finish it, all that behold it begin to mock him, saying, This man began to build, and was not able to finish." And I've read this verse especially for the last part of what we're going to talk about today, that when one contends or intend or thinks to build, one must think wisely. And in Adventist Home, there are counsels, and we're going to begin to look at that today. Let's start here. All right, so we talk about find spiritual lessons in daily living. All right, it says here, God has surrounded us with nature's beautiful scenery to attract and interest the mind. It is his design, red words now, it is his design that we should associate the glories of nature with his character. If we faithfully study the book of nature, we shall find it a fruitful source for contemplating the infinite love and power of God. I can tell you this, those who are grown as children in country environment are better fared out, even in terms of the character, than those who are grown strictly in the city. All right? And that's because even in the country area, there is lessons daily throughout nature and around the individual. So that's better. Let's read here. It says, page 144, it says, Christ has linked his teaching not only with the day of rest, but with the week of toil. You know you cannot appreciate rest without work, right? You know you cannot appreciate rest without work. And you see how God set it up? From the first day to the sixth, you should work. But the last day you rest, which makes a lot of sense. How Satan sets it up, it's the first day he makes them rest and work them out the rest of the day. God says work and rest. Satan says rest and then I kill you with work. All right? So God says the seventh day. You work from the first down to the sixth and you rest on the last day to rejuvenate and start again. It's a cycle. So it says in plowing and sowing, the tilling and reaping, he teaches us to see an illustration of his work of grace in the heart. Okay? It says here, so in every line of useful labor and every association of life, he desires us to find a lesson of divine truth. Then our daily toil will no longer absorb our attention and lead us to forget God. It will continually remind us of our Creator and Redeemer. The thought of God will run like a thread of gold through all our homely cares and occupation. For us, the glory of his face will again rest upon the face of nature. Red words, we shall ever be learning new lessons of heavenly truth and growing into the image of his purity. Now, plowing and sowing, what spiritual lessons can you learn from that? Patience, okay? And you plow and you sow. What are you sowing? You will sow corn and reap peas. Whatever you invest is what you get, correct? Now, even when you sow the seed, do you leave it there? Are there more work to do? You have the tilling and the reaping. Okay? You have to take care of the root of the plant. You have to weed. Now the weeding, do you plant that? When you're weeding, you plant it? Okay, so where it come from? Out of nowhere. Must you weed? What will happen if you don't weed? Choke the plant, covers them. What's the perfect spiritual lesson? Those weeds. What's the perfect spiritual lesson? What's the perfect spiritual lesson? I thought this would be easy. Sin, church. The weeds are like sin. They come where you never planted. They overtake, they are invasive, and they destroy every good thing. And you have to get rid of it. I thought that would be easy. The weeds. The weeds represent spiritually sin. When it comes into your life, if you don't take it out, it will take over your life. Weed. That's a spiritual lesson right there. Let's read this. It says, identical laws govern nature and mankind. It says, the great teacher brought his hearers in contact with nature. You know, when Jesus was teaching, he's on a hillside, he's by the seaside, he's underneath a tree, he's in the field, okay? So the great teacher brought his hearers in contact with nature, that they might listen to the voice which speaks in all created things. And as their hearts became tender and their minds receptive, he helped them to interpret the spiritual teaching of the scenes upon which their eyes rested. In his lessons, there was something to interest every mind, to appeal to every heart. Thus, the daily task, instead of being a mere round of toil, bereft of higher thoughts, was brightened and uplifted by constant reminders of the spiritual and the unseen. I can tell you this, since I've gone into country living, I have a greater appreciation for God. The silence, the bird sounds, the walks you get, the quietness and stillness of the air, the scenery to the eye, everything about it is different. And when you leave that and come into the drudgery of the city, you feel the difference. It's a fact. The air is heavy, the crowd is dense, the eyes are abused. Are you there with me? And so when Jesus comes back, the people who will be looking, Isaiah 26 verse 9, and saying, "Lo, this is our God, we have long waited for him, he shall save us." Those people, they're all going to be in the country. They're all going to be in the hills and in the mountains. When I left the country property and I was going into the city, I think I said this before, and I looked over, we left something burning. Burning, you know, you cut down, you have to burn and stuff like that. And I could look and I could see the smoke. Now, when you're in the mountains, it doesn't seem like you're high or you're in the mountains. But driving into the town and looking across all of that mountain, and I said, but wait, that's the fire. That is where we are, in the mountains, in the midst of nature, deep down in the trees and in the woods. It's a beautiful experience. It refreshes the mind and invigorates the soul. Jesus wants us to go there to teach us the lessons we need to know to prepare us for the eternal home. Let's read this. So we should teach. Let the children learn to see in nature an expression of the love and the wisdom of God. Let the thought of him be linked with bird and flower and tree. Let all things seen become to them the interpreters of the unseen, and all the events of life be a means of divine teaching. Remember what we read the text, right? Remember we read from Job. Remember we read from Romans chapter 1. Okay? All these things that God has made. And you don't really get to see these things much in the city. The most bird you're going to see is a pigeon. Pigeon come like them a city bird. People look like a city bird them for true, because when me in the country, I really see pigeon, you know. See some other birds. Going across the ford this week, and there was a bird that was just there. Seemed like some type of egret, but it wasn't white. It had a blue. I don't know if it was catching food there, but it was there. I went away, come back. It was still around the water. Right? When you're in the mountains, you will see birds. You will see different birds. Right? That you won't necessarily see by being in this plane and in this city. And these can be things to remind you of God. To remind you of God. And it's good for the children and for their minds to remind you of the Creator. And that's why I believe your country living experience as a family will be more fulfilling when you have animals around. All right, it says, as they learn thus, that's the children, to study the lessons in all created things and in all life experiences, it says, show that the same laws which govern the things of nature and the events of life are to control us, that they are given for our good, and that only in obedience to them can we find true happiness and success. So only in obedience to the laws that God has given us to govern us, laws of health, how to live, the same laws God has given to govern nature. Okay? And whenever things go out of order, as God allows, that's when you have destruction. When the seas pass their boundaries, when the earth moves from its place, so you have tsunamis, flooding, so you have earthquake, okay? And so there are laws that govern the universe that God has put in place. Just like there are laws that govern our being that God has put in place. And when the laws of nature goes out, then you have chaos. When the laws of our being based on our choices go out, sickness will be inevitable. It's just a matter of time. Here it says, give practical lessons in agriculture. In agriculture. I believe that every single high school should teach agriculture. Because agriculture is far more important than many other subjects being taught. All right? I would, as a government, I would put that in the curriculum of, I don't care if you want to be immaculate or champion. Every school, it must be mandatory that agriculture science is on their curriculum. Okay? Teaching the principles. I was going into town, and there were some two gentlemen carrying in the town in St. Mary, and they were just talking about the moon. And it was so interesting to just listen. And I don't think they learned that from any book. It's just the livelihood. And it's passed down, and they talk about the full moon. And I validated something that they said, because they said the full moon is coming in another 2 or so days. When the full moon starts, it's up in the sky from in the daylight, about 5 o'clock. And it comes from the point of St. Thomas and and by the next 2 days we're driving. My wife says, look. And we look in the daylight in the sky, and there was the moon. And the water, before the full moon shines, the water comes, the rain. And therefore, after that, you can plant. There's a science to it. That God, remember what I'm saying? God has set these things in order, the laws in nature. Okay? So give practical lessons in agriculture. Of the almost innumerable lessons taught in the varied processes of growth, some of the most precious are conveyed in the Savior's parable of the growing seed. It has lessons for old and young. You remember the seed? A sower went out to sow seeds. Some fell among rocky ground. Some fell among thorns. Some fell by the wayside. And then some fell on good soil. It's 4. Okay? I didn't necessarily say them in the order that Christ said them. But that's the 4 that he covered. Those that fell among stony ground, they grow, they develop, but they don't last. Because the roots they don't go down deep. And that represents who? The seeds are the word of God. Okay? That's Jesus. That's what he does. Parables, true nature. The seed is the word of God. The stony ground areas, they receive the word and they are glad, but they start well, but they don't finish. Because they don't develop roots that go deep. And so when trials come, they fade away. He speaks about those among the thorns. And what happened to those hearers? They receive the word, but the cares of life, okay, just like the thorns, it choke out the word. And so it finds no place. And those by the wayside, birds come and pick those up, okay? They receive the word, but there's no growth. Just like the birds taking them away, the world and the cares, the desires takes them away. And finally, the seeds on good ground, good soil, develop roots, and they grow and multiply and produce many more seeds. Those are those who hear the word of God, accept it, believe it, and it takes root in their life. So you see, Jesus uses the same things of nature to teach powerful lessons that even today they remain with us. Let's read down the bottom here. It says the germination of the seed represents the beginning of spiritual life, okay? And the development of the plant is a figure of the development of character. As parents and teachers try to teach these lessons, the work should be made practical. And so when you go into the country as a family, you must understand that not only you must get into the work, in the agriculture, in the cultivating, but the child, you need to give the child a spot. Teach the child, and the child need to water and grow and reap. That's what needs to happen. Wrong habits seen as weeds. Remember this? If possible, the home should be out of the city. Home should be out of the what? The city. It says, where the children can have ground to cultivate. Do you hear that? How are you going to do that in a housing scheme? How are you going to do that when the house is joined to house? The children are going crazy. They break things in the house because they pour energy. They don't have nowhere to run, nowhere to go. How are you going to do that when you're joined house to house in apartments? Now, I'm not saying that for any condemnation. I'm saying that to mean if your position is like that, you know it's not God's ideal and it needs to change, and it can change. God is able. It says, if possible, the home should be out of the city where the children can have ground to cultivate. Let them each have a piece of ground of their own, and as you teach them how to make a garden, how to prepare the soil for seed, and the importance of keeping all the weeds pulled out, teach them also how important it is to keep unsightly, injurious practices out of the life, which represents the weed. And when you teach lessons like that, it doesn't leave the mind. Did you know that? Have you ever, as a teacher, ever given an example to teach a lesson, and even today it still remains in your head? Practical. Okay? Very practical. And that's how Jesus taught, that even children could understand. Watch this, church. Teach them to keep down wrong habits as they keep down the weeds in their gardens. It will take time to teach these lessons, but it will pay, greatly pay. And you can only teach these things in the country. It's going to pay and greatly pay. Listen this now. It says, home surroundings should exemplify our belief. It should exemplify our what? Our belief. Let's read. Parents are under obligation. What does the word obligation mean? Can you give me a synonym? Responsibility. When you're under the obligation, is that duty? Is that duty? So if God puts you under an obligation and you don't carry through, do you think it would look good in the books of heaven? It says parents are under obligation to God. You're under obligation to who? Me? FTB? Parents are under obligation to God to make their surroundings such as will correspond to the truth they profess. They can then give correct lessons to their children, and the children will learn to associate the home below with the home above. The home below with the home above, to make their surroundings such as will correspond to the truth they profess. They can then give correct lessons to their children, and the children will learn to associate the home below with the home above. I don't have to question. I know that it is better for young children from as early as possible to grow in a country living experience. Every one of us who have experienced both can testify that this is from God, because it is true. That nothing beats a country living experience. It says here, the family here, that's earth, must, as far as possible, be a model of the one in heaven. Then, temptations to indulge in what is low and groveling will lose much of their force. Children should be taught that they are only probationers here. Remember, probationary time will soon close. And educated to become inhabitants of the mansions which Christ is preparing for those who love him and keep his commandments. This is the highest duty which parents have to perform. And that's it. The highest duty that parents have to perform is to prepare the children for heaven. Don't forget, some of us get caught up, the children are not yours. You see, let me say something. You see how serious it is to understand that the children are not yours? Therefore, everything that you do concerning a child, you are really acting to God. So you must ask the question, have I done right things or wrong things? Because who is going to recompense is God, because the children are not yours. So the greatest responsibility you have is to prepare the child for heaven. And guess what? I found out. When parents take it this way, they are also preparing themselves. Because the things that you have to do in preparing the child for heaven, guess what? You're preparing yourself. Can we agree? Definitely. That's how it works. And this is the highest duty. Let's read right here what it says. It says, parents, get homes in the country. I remember, was it David Gates? I remember he was saying, when they were moving out in their country living experience, and some brethren got together and they purchased a place up in the hills, land, and they were developing the land and stuff like that. And he made a statement. He says, we're not going to help anybody who actually have their house in the city. So he's saying, you have your house in the city, and you're coming to say, boy, we don't have nothing. He's saying, I'm not looking to help people like those, because you have to make the sacrifice. Sell that you have in the city and come, and then build with what you have gained from what you sell. But you cannot try to have, how we say it? What's the Jamaican way to say it? Have your cake. Yeah, and the one I'm trying to remember is your eggs in what? Oh, that's not it. Well, probably that's not the appropriate. It says don't have all your eggs in one basket. I think but that wouldn't fit to what I want to say. But the point I'm making is you can't have it both ways. You can't have it both ways. To move on the Lord's bidding today, you have to make sacrifice. I've made sacrifices. You have to make sacrifice. And the first thing you're going to have to give up is your conveniences. Your what? But let me tell you something. You see, after a while, you see whatever you start to go through when you're making this move, none of it remains. It gets better. It gets what? It gets better until you don't even realize you're living like king and queen. Remember, I tell you this, the cities are going to burn. And I'm not talking about when Christ comes. I'm talking before that. Civil war, civil unrest. And it's not just going to happen in America. And whenever those things break out, where you think it's happening? It's not in the country. It's in the city. Down in Kingston here. When they had the Civil War, hear me, I got asked if you remember. Some of you weren't born, and I wasn't born either, All you hear me up here talking. But we're talking about the 1970s. The older ones you would know. There was basically a civil war in Jamaica, The politics, the politricks. And you could end up in an area in Kingston, and it's one question they're asking you, green or orange. Now, here's the problem. You don't know them a while, You can only pray, say you say right thing, because if you say green, and you can't choose none, If you say green and them are orange, dog, yum, you suffer. It would be best for you to know that this area is orange, for say orange, or power, or shower. Right? But where was that taking place? All of Jamaica in the 70s? No. is in the central area in Kingston, right? And a lot of people took off into go back in the countries. Country, rural is always where you're going to escape the problem. It happened in the vaccine era too, or in the C19. A lot of people that were escaping the issues were people that were not in the cities. I remember when they locked down Portmore. You remember that? Who remember? They locked down Portmore because of some call center thing. You don't remember? Don't remember, brethren? I missed that by an inch, you know. At the time, I was at University of the West Indies in medical school program there. So I had a place up there that I stayed. But I would sometimes come back home in Portmore. And that very day, I just got out of Portmore before the news break. Like an hour or two. And if I got caught in Portmore, okay, I would not be able during that time to go to the place in Manchester at the time where we were preaching live online. So the people would not be getting a message for a period because I would have been locked down in Portmore, but I just escaped it by the skin of my teeth. All right? And a lot of people were, and I don't know if you remember the traffic of people coming out of Portmore. And people had come on and said, boy, don't come on my yard. All who never used to come visit me, no better come now. It was chaos. And what happened to the Adventists? What happened to the Adventists? The announcement was made like Tuesday evening. After they locked it down, and then Tuesday evening. And in that week, they said only 2 days going to be for shopping. Wednesday, and guess when was the next day? Saturday. So how much days Adventists would have to shop? One. But when they made that announcement Tuesday, if you don't have the money, if you go Wednesday, dog, yam, supper. You see what happened? We need to learn from the past, okay? We have to learn from the past. So it says, get homes in the country, so long as God gives me power to speak. Listen what the prophetess is saying. To our people, I shall continue to call upon parents to leave the cities and get homes in the country. She's dead long time, but the writing is still here. And she says, as long as God gives me power to speak. She's dead, not speaking, but the word is speaking. I shall continue to call upon parents to leave the cities and get homes in the country, where they can cultivate the soil and learn from the book of nature the lessons of purity and simplicity. The things of nature are the Lord's silent ministers. Did you hear that? Given to us to teach us spiritual truths. They speak to us of the love of God and declare the wisdom of the great master artist. Have you ever seen any piece from God? The master artist. Have you ever seen any piece? Sometimes I look up and I see a piece of artwork there. You ever see that? Sometimes I look up, and when I look, I say, oh, what an artist. He paints the skies, and then the sun is just falling behind the cloud, and a little piece left out, and it's peeking, and then it colors the clouds into shades of evening, of orange, and it's, oh, you never see it before. I see my artist do some painting sometime. Sometimes I look up, and when I look, there's a dark cloud, and it covers, and behind that is a brighter cloud, and the sun is hid, but the rays of light are shining through. I've seen some piece of work from the artist there. That's in the skies. Have you ever looked at some stones and on the hillsides, how the breeze cut the stones, and it leaves some patterns? The master artist. I've seen it. Nature. But I can't see no art in a Kingston because I just say concrete and all building and them things. I don't see no art in that. And smoke and all them things down car. No art no in that. No art is in that church. But when God begins to paint, what a beauty. 147, It says here, I love the beautiful flowers. Adventist Home. They are memories of Eden, pointing to the blessed country into which, if faithful, we shall soon enter. The Lord is leading my mind to the health-giving properties of the flowers and the trees. And even when you look at that picture, this is a real picture, It's not generated by it's a real picture somewhere in some foreign country, but these are real plants. Look at the flowers there. Real, it's beautiful. That's the artist right there. That's God. You see, the best art we can do, is look at the original artist and draw that back. That's the best we can do. And so when we draw it on a canvas. But this original artist is the original. Look at the purple. And I shade a little orange there. Pink. It's pink here. Look at yellow. Orange there, so white. Oh, it's beautiful. It's beautiful. Flowers, they do that. Plants. Okay? Let's read right here. It says, building and furnishing the home. All right? Building and furnishing the home. So, we have looked at church. We're closing one section and moving on to another. Building and furnishing the home. We have looked at the city and the positive effects on the family and the negative effects on the family. We have looked at the lessons to be learned. We have looked at the usefulness of the child and the positive benefits of the child. And actually, when we did the series back about a year, back 2 years, on country living, we even used some of these very quotations we're reading now. So it's like going back over, but in this context, on the background of family. On the background of family church. All right? And so I really hope that if you're not there, that you're planning to be there. Planning to get there. Because God's will and purpose have a future to it. And we know what is coming. No buy, no sell. Now, I can tell you something as we shift over into this gear. As we want to close up this section between now and to next week. As we're talking about the building and furnishing the home. Is there an intelligent way to build? I was talking to a brethren, and he has about a 2-bedroom in his country land. About 16 to 20 windows. Think that's too much, Sister Carol? Think that's too much windows? No. Let me put something out there. Can you actually have too much window? I don't think you can. You actually can't have too much windows. It's up to you. But let me ask another question. Can you have too little? Yes. Oh, yes. Oh, yes. But you can't have too much? Sure. Somebody might say, what? A 2-bedroom with 16 plus windows? And the person says, I open the whole of them every day. I just throw them out and they open day right into the night. I can tell you those people will never get sick. Because in the country, the trees are clean in the air and your home is well ventilated. I can tell you the negative effects of having too little window. If I hear of things near mold, that will kill you and give you cancer of the lungs. You cannot see it with your eyes, but it's all the way there. And there are a few things that make sure that no mold grows. Light, ventilation, dryness. The opposite of those grow mold. Moisture, darkness, and less ventilation. All right, so we are so blessed as God's people that no stone is left unturned. No stone is left unturned. We are so blessed as God's people that we have all the counsels, and I don't know if you've read it and you're reading the book, but at least as the shepherd, under shepherd, Jesus is a shepherd, I'm under shepherd, at least as the under shepherd, I've exposed you to it. All right, let's transition a little as we talk about building and furnishing the home. Listen what this says. Provide ventilation. What's going to provide ventilation? Windows. Sunlight. What's going to cause all that sunlight to come in? Windows and drainage. What's drainage? No waterlog, no wet around the house. These things cause miasma and sickness. As if you're not builders yet, use these guidelines. God has laid it out so we don't have problems. Watch this now. In the construction of buildings, whether for public purposes, for example, sanitarium, or as dwellings, care should be taken to provide for good ventilation and plenty of sunlight. For good ventilation and plenty of what? Plenty of sunlight. Matter of fact, when you're sleeping in the night, you should be getting the fresh air from outside. And in the day, you're getting the sunlight and air again. It says, churches and schoolrooms are often faulty in this respect. Listen to this. Neglect of proper ventilation is responsible for much of the drowsiness and dullness that destroy the effect of many a sermon and make the teacher's work toilsome and ineffective. That is too simple, Pastor. I can't accept that. You're telling me that the reason why some students in some school, in some classroom are dull and they keep falling asleep in the lesson is because they don't have enough ventilation? Yes. So hold on. You're telling me. You are telling me that the reason, you are telling me that the reason people are falling asleep, well, this is kind of different here. But you're telling me the reason people are falling asleep when you're preaching is because the church don't have enough ventilation? Well, I don't have no control over this building. I think we have enough ventilation. All of that up there. And even that side. You know you can't look through those windows, right? Based on how it's built. But you know they cannot stop air from coming in. Even though they're built like that. Air will come through, right? And right there. So I think we are much ventilated. I don't think we get much sleeping in the sermon. Except for probably occasional sleepers. Or by habit sleepers. And I think that leads back to tiredness or what you're doing in the week. But the lack of proper ventilation can lead to poor oxygenation. And the poor oxygenation causes your blood to slur, to slug, instead of flowing freely in the body. And that combination leads to drowsiness. See that? So, I'm taking note, So when we're setting up that place in St. Mary, both the public, sanitarium, and the private, the home, window, doors, light, sunlight, air. All right? So it says, let's go forward. We're almost to the end, I think.
Question, Pastor. So what about those who are in rooms that are locked up with ACs?
Oh, no. No.
Because many of our churches have gone that way. The churches are closed, they have AC, so you don't have the natural air circulating. Many of the churches are now cushioned, the chairs, the benches are cushioned, and they are AC.
Natural breeze can invigorate the body. AC breeze keep you cool and put you to bed. That's what it does. Come in, Sister Karen. And so, churches and cushion seats, man, that's a sleeping church. That's a sleeping church. What you want, The lungs and the blood can't appreciate AC, you know. It's only your skin appreciating the AC, you know. But what the air brings is the oxygen. Are you there? That fresh oxygen that you're going to inhale into the lungs. All right, Sister Karen?
Yes, Pastor. Going back to the previous quotation, when we go outside of the councils, when it speaks about the schools, I don't know. Well, in my days, there were a lot of schools, the windows were like that.
Like that?
Like that concrete thing, and they can't move. So very little.
That's not the best ventilation.
Or they have what we call some metal louvers, and you don't get much air, and then sometimes they are in the, the middle of the building, they are inside, sort of. So there's wall on either side and one little side with some windows, which doesn't really bring in any air. And then, to make matters worse, the students spend, even small children, so many hours sitting in those classrooms. It is doing more damage, more harm to them than anything else. And the council tells us that especially young children should not be in a classroom sitting for so many hours. They should be more active and doing things that will get the blood stimulated and, the mind moving instead of sitting in those classrooms.
The best windows are those windows when you open it, you push it out, and the two of them just swing so, and just leave a big open space. What do you call those? French windows. Yeah. Those are the best windows, I think. Right? So, well, even if they stop making windows like that, I know that you can order workmen to make that window. Carpenters or so, and make them and fit in your glasses and stuff, and you can open them. And of course, the ideal material that you're going to be using in your country to build is actually board. Board is the ideal, not metal and not concrete. Not metal and not concrete. And so I'll be moving in that direction. That's the ideal, so the house breathes best. All right? The councils are there. They are there for our health. You don't want to be building a place that's not... And there's something here. We're talking about sunlight and air. You see this thing that says... construction of building, whether for public purposes and or the dwellings, care should be taken to provide good ventilation, plenty of sunlight. But there's something else there not dealt with necessarily so much, the drainage. The drainage. So you must make sure if you're getting a land, you check for that. That the land is not going to be sopping up water and swampy and wet, because that's not good. You're going to get sick. All right, so you have to check things like that. All right, look at that house there. Can you see it? It's a nice house. You like that house? It's nice. This is nice. This is wood, you know. Look at the board. Look at that. What do you call this? Porch, or not porch, but yeah, that's nice. It's a nice house. Your porch and your, yes, beautiful. And you see the French windows? It's over there. Can you see it here? This can open all the way, and you just push it open. Right? From in the middle, they just push open like that. All right? So, what's funny is that one time people associate board house with what? Poverty. You see how when you study things, it's like, but, did you know the rich people, most of them have a cabin in some far bush, well set up nice, and what do you think it's built out of? Nice furnished board, beautiful. Logs and stuff like that. Log cabin, and go on Google some of the most beautiful. They're not cheap. It's true, they're not cheap, but I'm just making a point that idea of board house equating to poverty, no, false concept. All right? so far as possible, it says, all buildings intended for human habitation, that means you're living in it, should be placed on high, well-drained ground. How should be where? As best as possible, should be placed where? On a high, well-drained ground. When we began to clear the land, we cleared a portion. And it started low and then it went up nice and plateaued up. So we said, nice, this is a high point. We marked it out with the board and said the house is going to go there. But as we cleared, I think all is cleared now. As we finished clearing, then there was a higher point up flat where you're basically looking at the mountains. And then we had to move where the house was going to be and putting it at the highest point up. So guess what happens when you're up? Even when the rain falls, what's going to happen with the water? It's going to drain down. So you're always going to be left with dry and high. So it says it should be placed on high, well-drained ground. This will ensure a dry site. This matter is often too lightly regarded. Continuous ill health, serious diseases, and many deaths result from the dampness. And I can tell you about that with mold and malaria of what? Low-lying, ill-drained situations. I'm so glad to be a Seventh-day Adventist. Which other church? Where else? Got a hand down there? Which other church? Where else you going to get these information? They're so true, fact. Brother Patterson?
Yes, Pastor. You're talking about the boathouses. If you can get trees that are mature, are the best thing for build a log cabin. The most expensive part is the chinking, where the two logs rest together. Because you don't have to use nail. You sharpen the wood, drill it, and plug them. That's how most log cabins are built. With the windows, they are making them out of aluminum now. And you can get them in any style you want. French, office, tilt, like this. So you don't have a problem, and the aluminum will never rot.
Yeah.
So even if you have a log cabin, and you make the aluminum windows and put in, you will never have a problem.
You remember the text we read in Luke? Which man is building and does what? And don't consider. Remember the last text? And don't consider. So what this is showing us today as we're reading these is that even in the building, we must consider all of these things. Because you want to avoid, even when you're building, you want to avoid getting sick.
The only problem with a log cabin is that when you're cutting the wood, you have to cut it at dark night. If you cut it with moonshine, chichi kill you.
Yeah.
Even bamboo. If you cut bamboo in a moonshine, it don't last no time. But if you cut bamboo in a dark night, chichi never take it.
Yeah. So that's another science. I don't fully understand it, but I know dark night, bright night, or full moon, okay? But I guess these are the laws God has set in place. So, windows, ventilation, sunlight, good drainage, dry, high ground. All right, let's go to our last slide for today. It says, in the building of houses, okay, it is especially important to secure thorough ventilation and plenty of sunlight. Let there be a current of air and an abundance of light in every room in the house. Sleeping rooms should be so arranged as to have a free circulation of air day and night. That alone can prevent you from getting sick. That alone that we just read. Free current of air day and night. And when you live in the country, you have the best air possible. Best air possible. All right? When you live in the country, you have the best air possible because the trees and it's clean in the air and you want to get that going. Can you imagine when you're sleeping? You're still breathing and that fresh air through the lungs, invigorating, refreshing the blood, right? So as much windows as is possible, right? For ventilation, sunlight, high ground, good drainage, dry. All right? So this is the last one actually. It says, no room is fit to be occupied as a sleeping room unless it can be thrown open daily to air and sunshine. In most countries, bedrooms need to be supplied with conveniences for heating. That don't go for us. We don't have snow, okay? That they may be thoroughly warmed and dried in cold or wet weather. In those times, a lot of people who deal with that cold and wet England, some of these very cold places in the winter, now, February, they have to have those eating facilities for their best and betterment and for their health. We don't have that problem. This is Jamaica. But we must have the windows, the ventilation, the air, the sunshine coming in, good high ground, good drainage, dry. Those principles alone, governing, going forward in building in the country, those principles alone can keep you from ever getting sick. So good to be a Seventh-day Adventist. A lot of people don't know these things. A lot of people don't know in receipt of these truths and understand. Sister Carol? Can you put what you say about lizard? No, man, I used to say something about lizard. The mosquitoes.
Yes, to keep out the lizard and the mosquitoes. Wouldn't that be feasible in the country too?
When the lizards come in, you hold them with your hand and fling them back through the window.
No.
You just hold them with your hand and fling them back through the window. Huh? Lizards?
Yeah.
What you say, Sister Carol?
Those big croc lizard.
No, man, it's still not bigger than your hand. Just hold and throw him through the window.
No, sir.
There's no lizard I've ever seen in any house that's bigger than your hand. You hold him in your hand and throw him through the window.
So you don't have, wouldn't there be bats?
Bats?
Yeah.
No, man. What we call bats in Jamaica is not bats, it's moth. We have bats in Jamaica, but most time you hear people say bat is a little moth flying in the house. Those things are harmless.
So
hardly you're gonna buck up any rat bat, as they call it in Jamaica, in your house, in the country. Unless you're right beside a cave and they're flying through.
So you don't think it best if we put up meshes at the window?
Not saying you can't put up the mesh. When you do put up the mesh, it will affect the quality of the air versus a big open window. When the air is hitting, the current of air is going through the house. The air is still going to come through the mesh, but it's just a simple science that the quality won't be the same. But people do these things to prevent what you think is the most dangerous thing. In Jamaica, I'm so glad to be in Jamaica. In Jamaica, in country living, what's the most dangerous thing you're going to have to deal with? Scorpion. I never see scorpion. I must say one time I see scorpion in Manchester, a black scorpion, and we killed it. Huh? In my mind, the most dangerous thing we're going to have to deal with is rat. Rat. And the rat running from you. Right, the leptospirosis, which is from their urine. So you have to protect your food. And let me tell you something. The cabin that we put up, the cabin we put up in St. Mary, okay, when you're clearing land like that, the rats live in the bamboo and the old tree. When you start push down and clear, you're gone into the area, the rats going to come where the food is. Are you there with me? We're talking some big rats, but they're not attacking you. You just make sure you kill them when you find them. Or try, Remember, I went into the cabin one Sunday, and when you look in the corner, right, it's a big rat up there. I ended his time on earth. I ended his time on earth. And by the time I look, another one running, but that one escaped. I felt a way about that. I wanted to get 2 out of 2, but I only managed 1. And gave him a good burial. I didn't just leave him out in the air dry. I dug a good grave and covered him with his stripes and everything, buried properly. But I had to end his time on earth because those things are not pets. They are rodents, disease. So we take them out as we see them. Friday I had to end another one's time on earth, but that was a little mice. I had to end his time on earth as well. As I see them, we take them out quickly. All right, they are rodents. But the other things, they are just there. Frogs. Frogs just come up to catch the little insect and have a nice view. Lizards, they're coming out to eat their insects as well. Okay, but these are not things to be afraid of. These are things to teach you spiritual lessons in the country.
Pastor.
Yes.
Someone online is asking if there are no snakes in Jamaica.
Okay, so someone is asking if there's no snake in Jamaica. Yes, there is a snake in Jamaica called the Jamaica boa, B-O-A. It is a non-poisonous snake. I have never had the privilege of bucking up one anywhere. But they are here. You can find some of them in Manchester and here and there. But we don't have really problems. And I am delighted to know it's not poisonous. So if I ever buck up one, we see who will win the contest. If I ever buck up one. But I've never buck up a Jamaica boa. But they're here in Jamaica, here and there. But can you imagine if we had to contest Sister Karen with a bear? Someplace abroad, you open your door and a bear is right there. All right? Kangaroo, well, that's on Australia. A lot of things the people abroad have to face. Remember talking to a brother in Canada, and he's going out and he has to go out with his rifle. Not to kill the bear, but to, if he sees a bear, he shoots in the air and the bear runs away. All right? This is beautiful Jamaica. We don't have none of that to contend with. Brother,
yes. With the rats, you have a very easy way to get rid of them, you know.
yes.
Get rats, no rodent can pass gas. So when you grate the coconut, you juice it, you parch it in the Dutch pot, and throw some baking soda in there. When him eat it, him can't pass gas, him just swell and dead.
Okay.
If it is wickedness, you allow them to eat your food then. The lizards, you use a ripe banana, you squash it, put it in a bottle, a tall bottle, and tie it up. The crook lizard is going to go down in it to eat the banana, but him can't come back out.
Okay. All right, so you're getting some one-on-one basics with Brother Clark, some simple method and remedies to deal with your problems in Jamaica. You hear about the coconut with the baking soda for the rat and the banana in the bottle for the croaking lizard. So ladies who are afraid of croaking lizards, you now have a solution. Those who are afraid of the rat. There is nothing in Jamaica as it relates to animal that I am afraid of. So I don't have a problem. I don't have anacondas. Imagine if you were living in Belize and you go into the woods and buck up an anaconda, right? Which is a big snake, that a boa constrictor, that's the category. All right? This is sweet, sweet Jamaica. We don't have those problems. All right, Mike down the back.
Yeah, so how do I get rid of a green lizard?
Green lizard.
Big one.
Same thing Brother Clark said. But green lizards are for beauty, man. You see them, where we cutting down the trees, we see some big green lizards, and they're so green and pretty. Green and pretty. And I thank God that I've come a far way. Because in my early childhood days, every lizard dead. But that's not right. God forgive me, I've passed those days in my little boy days. So I'm not afraid of these things. There's nothing in Jamaica that can cause me any fear. So I say, sweet, sweet Jamaica. All right? All right, let us close. Loving Lord, eternal Father, another Sabbath has ended, another week has passed. We're now on the evening of Sunday, and another week has begun, and we thank you. Thank you for all that you have done, all that you are doing, and all that you will do, Father. Thank you for being with us today. Bless your people here and around the world, and may we continue to remain faithful until the end when you come. In Jesus' mighty name.